appears that Vice President Joe Biden is not in favor of legalizing marijuana. In fact, recently, the former vice president defended his reasoning to not legalize cannabis on a federal level if elected president during a town hall in Las Vegas over the weekend. So now he said this. He said, quote, "The truth of the matter, there's not nearly been enough evidence that has been acquired as to whether or not it's a gateway drug. It's a debate, and I want a lot more before I legalize it nationally. I want to make sure we know a lot more about the science behind it." Okay. Well, look, we do know we have a few ideas, at least. And by ideas, I mean a fairly large body of research showing that marijuana is not, or cannabis is not, a gateway drug. In fact, some research suggests that it's more actually a terminus drug. Because, and I know you're going to be, terminus? What does that mean? What does that mean? Is that bad? No, terminus just means most people who use marijuana don't go on to actually use other drugs. In fact, you kind of see the opposite. People who use a lot of the other drugs also just happen to use marijuana as well, or to go to it after they've also used other drugs. But it doesn't seem to go in the opposite way. People try marijuana and they're just generally like, either they like it and they continue to use it, or they're just like, yeah, whatever. Don't really care. Okay. Now, in fact, there's no evidence to back up gateway theory because one of the things that they use mainly for gateway theory is correlation, right? But correlation does not equal causation. That would be a logical fallacy. And so that's unfortunately what their argument really relies on. Like, but there's people that use other drugs that use marijuana. Yes, but correlation does not equal causation. So anyway, now Biden says, well, I don't support legalization, but I do support medical marijuana and also decriminalizing small amounts of possession, right? Now, he also said on Saturday that he thinks the decision to legalize marijuana should be left up to the states. It's kind of a mishmash of different positions. I don't know. Like, well, I mean, let's let the states legalize it, and let's decriminalize small amounts of possession, but also keep it illegal at the federal level. Now, he also says he would like to change the scheduling from Schedule 1, which it currently is, which is it has absolutely no medicinal or research value, and it's as bad as heroin. But I want to change that to Schedule 2. Okay. All right. So back in the states, though, states should be able to make a judgment to legalize marijuana. Well, I mean, a lot of states have, starting with, of course, Colorado and Washington. Now you have other states like California and even Michigan, and plenty more. And so, look, I said probably a good 4 years ago that it would be legalized in most states in about 10 years. So I got a few years to go before I'm ultimately proven right. But he said, look, I'm not going to, yes, we're going to let the states do what they want, but federally, it's still going to be illegal until we have more research. Okay. He said, quote, "It is not irrational to do more scientific investigation to determine, which we have not done significantly enough, whether or not there are any things that relate to whether it's a gateway drug or not. Number one, it's not a gateway drug. Not a gateway drug. But here's the fun thing, right? So again, state level, right? And so it's been legalized in certain states on the state level, but not at the federal level. He says, I want more research, right? It's funny because he's almost acting as if he wasn't vice president for 8 years and could have some impact on Obama's drug policy. The Obama administration, though, was like, no, we're going to keep it Schedule 1 so that we have no research on it. Again, Schedule 1 says there's no medicinal value. Don't even look into it. We're not going to do that at the federal level. Joe Biden could have had some sort of impact on that. Instead, Joe Biden was like, nope, no, Schedule 1, it's fine. Don't do any research. It's as bad as heroin. Okay, well, I disagree with that. And again, he could have done something about that, or helped persuade Barack Obama to do something about it. And that goes to the hypocrisy of Barack Obama as well. This is a guy who used to intercept and swoop in and steal people's, blood during college. Obama smoked weed during college. And yet he's like, and he's president now and says, I'm going to keep this to Schedule 1 when he could have actually done something. Absolutely ridiculous. Ridiculous, right? But Schedule 2, by the way, it's not any better. Now, here's the thing, right? So this is your classic okay boomer mentality. That's what I get from this. And look, to be fair, it is a slightly softer stance than what Biden had done traditionally in his career. And so this is a departure from what he used to advocate back, especially in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. In fact, 80s and 90s. Now, when he was a senator, for example, Biden went on TV to criticize a plan from George H.W. Bush. Now, George H.W. Bush and the Republicans, they wanted to escalate the war on drugs. So you might think, wait, Biden spoke out against that, right? But he only spoke out against it because he didn't think the Republican plan was right-wing enough, was cruel enough. So now this is his plan. Well, before we get into what he actually did, because there's some serious policies that he helped get passed and that he sometimes co-sponsored and even wrote pieces of legislation that did get passed into law that were hugely detrimental to especially the Black community, right? But first, let me give you a quote here why he was against George H.W. Bush. George H.W. Bush's plan. That came out wrong. Quote, quite frankly, the president's plan is not tough enough, bold enough, or imaginative enough to meet the crisis at hand. Bush's plan doesn't include enough police officers to catch the violent thugs, not enough prosecutors to convict them, not enough judges to sentence them, and not enough prison cells to put them away for a long time. So, mass incarceration of the violent thugs. What kind of language is that? Yeah, exactly. Biden even tried to out-Republican George W. Bush and Ronald Reagan. Bush would put out a proposal, for example, and Biden would try to go further to the right. One example is during a debate over a bill in 1991. Now, that would eventually become the 1994 crime bill. Biden argued that his plan was, quote, much tougher than the president's and provides more penalties for death for more offenses than the president's bill. Biden even claimed that his plan was so tough that we do everything but hang people for jaywalking. All right. Now, some of his policy positions included the Comprehensive Control Act, which was passed in 1984. It was spearheaded by Joe Biden and racist Senator Strom Thurmond, which expanded federal drug trafficking penalties and civil asset forfeiture without proving that the person is guilty of a crime. So this is a law, or that police, if they suspect that you're dealing drugs out of your home, without even having proof of it, without even going to court, can just say, "Oh, we think your car is involved in a drug deal. That's our car now. We're just going to take it. We think your house was the site of a drug deal, or we think that you might have been doing drugs in your house. We're going to take your house." Nothing they could do about it. More, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. This law was sponsored and partly written by Biden, and what it did was ratchet up penalties for drug crimes, but only certain drug crimes. Now, what it did is that it made a big distinction between crack and powdered cocaine. So now, this had a huge effect on the African American community. The law made it so someone would need to possess 100 times the amount of powder cocaine to be eligible for the same mandatory minimum sentence as crack. You know why? Because most people who did powdered cocaine were people who were powerful on Wall Street. Or at least I think that was a lot of people who would do powdered cocaine. Powerful Wall Street types and wealthy white people. Whereas crack, there is a big crack epidemic in the African American community. So, now, not only that, there's one more. Actually, two more. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988. Now, this law was co-sponsored by Joe Biden, and it strengthened prison sentences for drug possession, enhanced penalties for transporting drugs, and established the Office of National Drug Control Policy, which coordinated and leads federal anti-drug efforts. And also, as was mentioned before, the 1994 crime bill. That's Joe Biden's record. That's disastrous. In fact, here you had Washington Post opinion writer Radley Balko, who tweeted this back in 2015 about Joe Biden. Quote, "The martial incarceral state has had no greater friend in Washington over the last 35 years than Joe Biden." Yikes. And so, no, of course, he doesn't want to legalize marijuana. No, Joe Biden is basically a Republican on criminal justice. And in fact, there are Republicans, or at least libertarians, conservatives, that are actually to the left on Biden when it comes to drug policy. I'm not kidding. And he is way behind the rest of the Democratic Party on the issue. And in fact, you have Senator Cory Booker, Elizabeth Warren, and Bernie Sanders all said they would make marijuana legal on the federal level if elected. Andrew Yang also just came out and said, yes, we should legalize marijuana federally, and had released a plan that would pardon individuals who are imprisoned for nonviolent marijuana convictions. So I think that's the correct way to go. You should, decriminalize, no, not just decriminalize, legalize all drugs. Portugal did it. They had a lot of success with it. And so I think that's the direction we need to go. I know some of you might be thinking, well, that's crazy. Aren't more people going to do drugs? Well, that's where I point at Portugal, which actually had its drug levels decrease. But along with the legalization of all drugs, there need to be anti-poverty programs. And so the thing that drives people to drugs, it's not marijuana. It's not trying out a marijuana cigarette for the first time. Okay? What it is that it's poverty. It's depression. Things like that. And so to get really at the root of drug problems, you need to look at the causes of it, instead of punishing people for just the doing of those drugs, so the self-medication. And so there's that. All right. Again, the rest of the party here on the Democratic side, way ahead of Joe Biden, whereas Biden has, yes, progressed somewhat, little bit. He's still basically stuck in the okay boomer fever swamps of reefer madness. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.